Okay, just a brief introduction. Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is the UCCS Student Research Showcase. It's great to see everybody out there. This is an event we always look forward to. It happens every term. It's the culmination of a lot of work on the part of all of the students, and we're really proud for everything that you've accomplished. We know that some of the work has been really challenging and quite a heavy lift, but we consider it really important for everybody, if possible, everyone who lives in our community, to have some familiarity with how evidence for policy and for decision-making is generated. And you've now generated some of your own, so that's a very cool thing. We also want to use this opportunity to thank our internship hosts, who of course make experiential learning possible for our students, and we couldn't run a program without them. So thank you to those hosts who have been able to join us. And with that, let us begin.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Kravitz. And so the format for our undergraduate research showcase is that I will go ahead and call on the student. I'll say where it is that they interned. They'll go ahead and share their poster and research poster and go ahead and share a few words about it. And then we'll go ahead and turn it over to a question. So the question can go over to their internship host site. If no one from their internship host site has a question, then it goes over to our academic team. If you are wanting to go ahead and ask a question, if you can go ahead and make sure to raise your hand, and I'll go ahead and call and then unmute you. All right, and with that, we will go ahead and get started with our first student presenter. So our first student presenting today is Trisha Sapigal, who interned with the Fair Political Practices Commission, or FPPC.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Trisha Sapigal. Today, I will be presenting on how different K-12 institutions prepare students for college. And excuse me while I work with some technical difficulties there. All right. So, only 40% of aspiring college students enroll in college, and approximately 1 in 4 of those students believe that their academic performance and emotional health declined because their K-12 institutions underprepared them for the college transition. Though K-12 students transitioning from primary to secondary schools experience similar performance declines, we consider these effects normal and temporary. But what if these transitions were actually having long-term effects on students' college readiness? Assuming that 9 to 12 students enrolled in the 9 to 12 schools experience more institutional, meaning transitions between primary to secondary schooling, than their K-12 counterparts, I hypothesize that the uninterrupted duration students spend at one versus several K-12 institutions impacts their college readiness, a relationship I depicted in Figure 2. I conducted a comparative case study of 20 schools from 5 counties listed in my methodology section, with similar median incomes, child poverty rates, and urban-rural classifications to test my hypothesis. 4 different K-12 institutions were studied, 1 9 through 12 public and charter school, and 1 K through 12 public and charter school per county. I used an academic performance-based college readiness measure known as the College Career Indicator to determine the percentage of college-prepared students in each of the school's graduating classes of 2018. Then, I averaged the percentage of college-prepared students per institution and compared them to one another, as seen in Figure 3. Figure 3 shows us that on average, students enrolled in K-12 schools were more likely to be college prepared than students enrolled in 9 to 12 schools, supporting that K-12 continuance does positively impact students' college readiness. But because of the limited scope of my sample size, larger studies must be conducted to determine whether this relationship truly exists. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Trisha, for your great presentation today. If there's a question from the internship host site. And then if not, over to our academic team. All right, Dr. Kravitz.
Hi, Trisha. That was a really nice presentation and laid out in a way that even someone not familiar with the area could follow it. So thank you for that. I guess the obvious question is, do you imagine that there were other differences between charter schools and public schools that could explain the observed data other than the fact that there's continuity between K-12 in the charter schools?
Hi, Dr. Kravitz. Thank you for your question. So originally, I also believed that students attending a charter school would be more likely to experience some advantages in terms of their education. But if you actually look at figure 3, 9 through 12 charter school students are the least likely to be college prepared, and K through 12 charter school students are the most likely to be college prepared. So there does seem to be a discrepancy about what we believe about charter schools and education systems and what we actually find in the data. It's a very interesting discrepancy.
That is a great answer. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Trisha, for your great presentation. Thank you, Dr. Kravitz, for the question. And so our next student that will be presenting today is Zara Ali, who interned with the UC Student Association this term.
Hi, everyone. Give me 1 second while I share my screen. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Zara Lee, and I'm a student at UC San Diego, introducing my project, Food for Thought, the impact of food accessibility in college graduation rates. Food insecurity affects about 40% of all U.S. college students, and the University of California and California State Universities are no exception to this problem. Students are facing a food security issue at each of the UCs and CSUs, thus leading to my 2 research questions. Does the University of California or California State Universities have highly accessible and high quality food programs? And my second research question of does whether or not if a school is a UC or CSU interact with the quality of food security programs affect the percentage of students who graduate within 4 years? I hypothesize that the UC will have a higher quality and accessible food security programs at their campus. And I also theorize that a higher percentage of students who graduate in 4 years is due to the high quality of food assistance programs at their schools. To test my hypothesis, I created an index with 7 different categories to quantify the accessibility of these programs at each of the 32 campuses within the 2 systems. The categories are income eligibility, campus, if the campus had a food pantry, the location of the food pantry, the hours of the food pantry, if they provided CalFresh application assistance, and if they provided food-related resources during school breaks. And then I collected the data from graduation rates in 2018 of all 32 universities and compare that to their index rating and their graduation rates. As seen on my donut graph, UC Davis had one of the most accessible food security programs between the UC and CSUs, and then it had one of the highest 4-year graduation rates among the 32 campuses, while a campus like Cal State Maritime had one of the lowest index rating and had one of the lowest graduation rates, as seen on my scatter plot. My research shows the impact and importance of food-related resources for students' well-beings, and that shows while there is current funding and programs available, there needs to be more to provide students. There needs to be more programs to provide students to help improve their academic performance and their overall success. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that great presentation. And if there is a question from the internship website. All right. And if not, over to our academic team. All right, Professor Quila.
Hi, Zara. Thank you for the nice presentation here. I was just kind of wondering, how much differences were there, do you see, amongst UCs and CSUs in terms of their scores? Was there a lot of, variance? And also, what CSUs did the best?
Yeah, so the best CSU, as seen on the donut graph, was Cal State Long Beach. From what I did my research on, Cal State Long Beach had one of the best fundings for their programs, so they were able to have they're able to have a lot more of these food accessibility programs on their campuses. And then in regards to the averages of indexes, when it came to my calculations and seen on the donut graph, it did show that the UCs had a higher percentage or had a higher average of higher index ratings compared to the CSUs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zara, for a great presentation. And thank you, Professor Aquila, for that question. And so our next student that will be presenting today is Rachel Caligari, who interned with the UC Student Association.
Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen for you all. My name is Rachel Caligari, and today I'll be discussing my presentation, Assessing Basic Needs, a measure of UC food assistance programs. 48% of the University of California's undergraduates experience some level of food insecurity during the duration of their study. How do the UC campus's basic needs assistance programs provide for their students, and how effective are their programs at addressing food insecurity? I hypothesize that the better the quality and quantity of a UC campus's food assistance programs, the lower reported food insecurity is on that campus. I created an index to analyze program value across campuses. The index measures quality in terms of physical and digital access and quantity in terms of the number of food assistance programs offered. As shown in Figure 1, the number of programs offered varies widely by campus. Independent variable data collection comes from information available on each campus's basic needs website. I assessed the hours of operation, eligibility requirements, and whether or not each program had a website or social media page. Dependent variable data collection comes from the 2020 UC Undergraduate Experience Survey. This survey reports data on food insecurity rates at each campus. Figure 2 shows the final index ranking. The ranking is in descending order from top to bottom. San Diego scored the highest with an index value of 0.66, and UCLA scored the lowest with an index value of 0.5. My findings, as shown in Figure 3, reveal a slight positive relationship between percent of food insecure students and program index value. This means that as program index value increases, so does the level of reported food insecurity. This could be due to the fact that campuses have attempted to address pre-existing food insecurity by creating more programs to better support students' needs. I suggest that campuses expand their social media presence to better advertise food assistance programs to students. And moving forward, I would conduct this study again, examining the effects of cost of living on food insecurity rates. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel, for that great presentation today. And so if there is a question from the internship host site, if you'd like to go ahead and raise your hand. And then if not, over to the academic team. All right, Professor Butters.
Excellent presentation. Thank you, Rachel. I have a question for you about just kind of your measures. Can you tell us more about what the difference between quantity and quality are in your case? Thank you.
Yeah, so quantity is like the raw number of programs offered out of all the campuses. So the campuses were ranked out of the average number of programs was about 5 per campus, and there was a total of 15 programs. So that was 1/3 of the index score. And then quality, like I mentioned, was measured in terms of both physical and digital access. So physical access in terms of hours of operation and eligibility requirements, and digital access in terms of, like I mentioned, a website or social media page advertising the food assistance program to students. And each of those scores were were weighted 1/3 of the total index ranking. So physical access is weighted 2/3 of the index ranking, and quantity is weighted 1/3 of the index ranking. And then in total, that's the final index score.
That's excellent. A quick follow-up. What do you think would happen if you changed the weighting on how you did, and why did you choose that weighting?
Yeah, I wanted to weight quality heavier. So just because, any campus could have like 30 food assistance programs, but if there's no information about them, if the resources aren't great, that's not really supporting students' needs. And I think if I change the weights, probably campuses would score a little better if it was maybe in terms of more weighted towards quantity. In this case, like San Diego and Merced had a lot of programs and they were still the highest, but I think it could boost their score even past 0.6, maybe to the 0.7, 0.8 range.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel, for that great presentation. And thank you, Professor Butters, for that question. And so our next student that will be presenting today is Haley Hickey, who interned with UC Center Sacramento. Rachel, we might have to have you.
Sorry, I was
stop sharing.
All good. Hi, my name is Haley, and I'm researching what are the impacts of police departments on the University of California campuses. In my research project, I am trying to see if all the UC police departments provide services and if officers per students have an effect at each campus on crime rates. To find this relationship, I am researching to see if each UC has a representative amount of police officers per students at each campus. I am also finding the levels of offenses known to police that have occurred over a span of 4 years. I hypothesize that when there are more officers per students, there will be lower crime rates across each campus. To find and design this research project, I have taken reports from the FBI Uniform Crime Reporting, which is a transparent data website to see the student population police officers and crimes reported from 2016 to 2019 by the UC Police Departments. To measure the data I am creating a scatter plot to show the officer per 1,000 students and violent crime per 1,000 students between the 4 years. To further my analysis of solving the problem, I have researched what services each UCPD provides and created a donut chart. This will show what UCs have the services and what ones don't out of a ranking of 4. After my data and measuring, I have found that there is a relationship associated with lower crime rates when there are more officers per student. I have also found that a correlation between campus police resources and campus crime rates. My policy suggestions would support the idea that having more officers and UCPD resources available at each campus is impactful towards crime rates. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Haley, for that great presentation. And then a question from our academic team. All right, Professor Butters.
Hi, Haley. Great job. Thank you, Cindy, for letting me ask a question here. I wanted to know if I'm reading your figure 4 correctly. It looks like about half the campuses don't have the safety walks or escorts as you've measured them. So I'm just curious about what your thoughts on why that might be the case. Because this is in 2022, right? So does that have something to do with the pandemic and most people being at home, or what's exactly going on there? Why don't we have safety walks or escorts?
Yes. So each school has their own student service officer. So that is where students can provide these services that more on a student level than the officers themselves. So their jobs vary. So some of them provide these safety walks, some of them have them do more community things, more just, you know, working with other things with the police department specifically, not so much with the students. So I think it just varies on what the schools want these student officers to be doing, because they're the ones that usually provide these safety walks and escorts. So I think it just really depends on what the service officers at each campus, you know, want their jobs to be for the students.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, Haley, for a great presentation. Thank you, Professor Butters, for that question. And so our next student that will be presenting today is Stacy Zarita Ambrosio, who interned with the California Community College's Student Success Center.
Hello, my name is Stacy, and for my research project, I decided to focus on how did the pandemic decrease student enrollment at community colleges. So during the pandemic, higher education institutions were significantly impacted and challenged to maintain a steady enrollment rate. California community colleges have experienced the greatest enrollment decrease. Between 2019, the last full academic school year, to 2021, the full-time equivalent of students has decreased by 10%. And because of economic instability that the pandemic has brought, I hypothesize that by improving and increasing government funding for community colleges, they can obtain a better retention rate. For my data, I focused on student enrollment rates from 2019 to 2022, excluding summer semesters. I also gathered data from California Community College's Chancellor's Office and Public Policy Institute of California. From this, I would record the 3 types of higher education emergency relief funds that came into effect March of 2020. In my findings, I discovered that the first time and returning students in fall semester of 2021 saw the highest increase in enrollment. I also found that community colleges expedited funds based on campus resources and students' needs. Figure 2 shows just the approximate estimate of how community colleges divided funds. The emergency relief funds made it also possible for community college staff to initiate retention campaigns. This offered students multiple support services, encouraging them to stay enrolled. Because the funds have recently gone into effect, it was challenging to find data that fully measured its impact on enrollment. However, 2 colleges have seen a successful retention campaign from these funds. Maricosta College saw a 14% increase after having staff reach out to students, while Santa Ana College lost about 8,000 students after their retention campaign. They nearly got 50% of those students to return for the following semester. And in using the right tactics with the right funding, enrollment rates can increase by expanding funding to all students that attend college, like the Assembly Bill 1097, a policy that would implement the Promise Grant to expand its eligibility to part-time students as well. After the pandemic, many students still struggled with financial stability, and this would allow students to have the time and funds to fully transition back to school. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Stacey, on that great presentation. And if there's a question from the internship host site. And if not, over to our academic team. All right, Professor Quila.
Hi, Stacey. Thank you for the nice presentation here. You mentioned, the right kind of tactics to encourage participation. I was wondering, what are things that can be done to increase kind of this retention? What are some different like specific aspects that you think could be useful?
Yeah, so like I said, I know two of the biggest colleges that did mention these funds kind of having a positive effect on their enrollment rate was that they used a lot of outreach programs. So they had like a specific staff set aside that would contact these students either like through email, a phone call, just kind of asking and wondering what it is that would help these students get back into college. And because these funds did go like, I believe I showed it in figure 2, they went to like online instructions or student funding. A lot of them needed help like repaying back like student loans. So I know for some of them, they were given a few grants to kind of encourage them and like provide them with that help that they will continue helping if they continue going back to college.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Stacey, for that great presentation, and Professor Quila for the question. And so our next student that will be presenting today is Maxine Lagas, who interned with the California Senate Office of Research.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. This is my presentation on the health impacts of air pollution in California's American Indian communities. Native Americans face a large disease burden from environmental and water contamination, but there is a lack of air pollution research in these communities. In contrast, studies have shown that Black and Latino Californians are exposed to disproportionately higher PM 2.5 concentrations than white people. This gap leads to the question of whether American Indian communities are vulnerable to the adverse health effects of air pollution. My hypothesis is that as air pollution increases, the health impacts will increase more substantially for Native Americans relative to white populations and other racial minorities. Using data from Calum Bioscreen 4.0, I created composite scores for air pollution and health impacts using 6 exposure indicators and 3 health conditions. After examining a total of 50 census tracts across 10 California counties with the largest Native American populations, the findings of my comparative analysis provide support that the relationship between exposures and health impacts is stronger for Native Americans relative to other racial ethnic groups. Referring to the scatter plots in figures 3 and 4, Hispanic, white, and African American groups had negative correlations between air pollution and health impacts. Meanwhile, Native Americans and Asian Americans had positive correlations, with Native Americans having the highest correlation coefficient at R equals 0.47. However, due to the small sample size, the results are not statistically significant. Nonetheless, the results of my research may have implications on how the state allocates greenhouse gas reduction funds, and more broadly, whose voices we empower when creating environmental policy. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Maxine, for that great presentation today. And then there is a question from our internship host site. So Paul Jacobs, and I just unmuted you, Paul. You probably unmute your end too. All right, Paul, on my side, it shows that you're unmuted on our end, but you may have to unmute on your end too to be unmuted. Oh, there you go.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep, great. Thanks, Paul.
I'll just talk to myself, I guess. Thank you, Maxine. Good presentation. I just have a quick question on the correlation coefficient there in your results. Can you explain why that is a little bit, like what's driving that? What does that really mean, from a policy perspective? And then what do you think the policy solution to resolve that should be?
I think a possible explanation for these discrepancies in correlation coefficients, I had a very narrow sample size. So it was focused on counties with large AI populations. And my independent variable was health impacts. So I looked at asthma, low birth weight, and cardiovascular disease. And it may be common knowledge to us in the policy field that Native Americans do have high cardiovascular rates. So I think a possible explanation is due to the already large disease burden that Native Americans face, as well as the poor socioeconomic conditions, as California's Native American communities do have low educational attainment rates and low income levels compared to the rest of the state populations. So I think policy-wise, in terms of prioritizing our climate change funds across the state, we may be overlooking a key group who may not be as exposed to air pollution, but the health impacts are definitely present and a public health concern. Thank you for your question, Paul.
Great, thanks for your answer. Good job.
Great. Thank you so much, Maxine, for that great presentation. And thank you, Paul, for the question. So our next student that will be presenting today is Monica Garcia Ortega, who interned with the Mexican Consulate.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Monica Garcia Ortega, undergraduate student from UC Davis. In 2019, California farm workers produced the biggest agricultural profit for the U.S. and over $50 billion in production revenue, totaling 17% of the U.S. agricultural economy. Farm workers feed America, yet are one of the most food insecure groups. In my study, I find how the distribution of government-funded food assistance affect food insecurity among California farm workers. I hypothesize that more food assistance resource availability by county will lead to less food insecurity among each county. My analysis uses data from 2017 and observes a total of 16 California counties ranging in region and population sizes using a large N study. With a quantitative approach, I use statistical summaries from county, state, and federal government agencies. Number of food assistance locations per county, such as CalFresh, food banks, and WIC, are measured individually by the given information from each county website. County food insecurity percentages are measured using the 2017 Map the Meal Gap data. Figure 4 shows the relationship between food assistance and food insecurity. Counties with more food assistance locations, such as Los Angeles, San Bernardino, San Diego, and San Mateo County, had overall less food insecurity. However, counties an exception, such as Kern and Fresno County, were among the most food insecure, and both holding the greatest Latino farm worker populations. California policy should expand the benefits of the food assistance program so that Californians can become eligible regardless of their immigration status to reduce food insecurity among the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Monica, for that great presentation. And if there is a question from the internship host site. And then if not, over to the academic team. All right, Ginger Alonso.
Hey, Monica, I really liked how you set up the background. It was very effective in just giving us a sense of what was going on here as you're talking about your study. I was wondering if you could explain the food insecurity measure a little more, and just like, for example, is it measuring how frequently an individual feels hungry, or is it measuring how their lack of access? I was wondering if you could just explain that measure a little more for us.
Yeah, so the measure that I'm using actually comes from the USDA website, and they are measuring when a person is feeling hungry, and also considering the economic income of each household as well.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Monica, for that great presentation. And thank you, Ginger Alonso, for that question. And so our next student that will be presenting today is Wendy Solis, who interned with the Mexican Consulate.
Okay, let me give me 1 second. Let me share my screen. There you go. Okay, do you guys see that?
We can now. Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, alrighty. Good morning. My name is Wendy Solis. I'm a 4th year of political science and international affairs major in UCR. I like to start by highlighting a study done by the National College Health Assessment 2018. They surveyed college students nationwide and reported that 63% of college students felt overwhelming anxiety and 42 felt so depressed that it was difficult for them to function. Mental health is a really concerning issue and growing problem among college students and directly affects their educational attainment. My hypothesis is that as funding for student services increases, retention rates will increase as well. I compare the 4-year rates of entering class of 2014 until the graduation to 2018 to the student services funding provided throughout those same years. In my findings, as shown in figure 1, I discovered that the average retention rates for these 4 years decreased by 40% across all states. In figure 2, you will see the average funding of student services increasing yearly, with 2018 being the year with the most funding at $47 million. My third figure displays a comparison between student services funding based on the retention rates of each academic year. One surprising finding I did see from this graph is that we can visibly see how the fine was the highest in 2017 to 2018, but the retention rates were the lowest at that time. My analysis overall was that the cohort stayed persistent with the degree attainment from their 1st to 3rd year, but there was a significant or dramatic drop, in their last year, with the student services funding was actually the highest. My findings did not clearly show a direct impact of mental health services on student retention, since the services fall within the category of student services, but it is reported by the CalC system that as funding overall for student services increases, the money allocated for mental health specifically does increase as well. My overall suggestion would be that it'd be very beneficial for CalC universities to share this information among their prospective college students, since it can help students understand which campus supports better the college experience regarding to mental health, and it can be a driver for student enrollment.
Great. Thank you so much, Wendy, for that great presentation. And if there is a question from the internship host site, and then if not, over to our academic team. All right, Professor Butters.
All righty, excellent. Thank you, Wendy. It was a good presentation there. I just have a question about your overall understanding about what CSUs are all about. So are they kind of more of a commuter school? And do you think that might play a role in their mental health at the CSUs and the facilities available to individuals? I see they're spending a lot of money on that, but maybe something to do with people not living on campus or having access to these programs. Just wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so Cal States tend to be more of a commuter campus. But one thing I did notice at that, like UCs have like a healthcare plan, but Cal States don't. They charge more like a student service fee for access to these services, and then students have to pay like out of pocket to be access like counseling and therapies of that sort. So I feel like it was between like the discrepancies of that was kind of a big thing I should have been able to measure, but it is kind of difficult since student services funding is like an umbrella term for all the funding that has to relate to students, services provided to students.
Okay, so it's kind of difficult to pinpoint then. All right, well, thank you very much for the answer.
Great. Thank you so much, Wendy, for that great presentation. And thank you, Professor Butters, for the question. And so our next student that will be presenting today is Simon Jumpshot, who interned with the California Governor's Office of Planning and Research.
Oh, that's not what I wanted to share. There we go. Hi, I'm Simon Jumpshot. I'm a 4th year political science public service major at UC Riverside. Californians have all experienced longer, drier droughts. Just in September, California saw massive heat waves, and Governor Newsom said the West Coast broke nearly 1,000 temperature records. Simultaneously, violent crime is on the rise, with gun-related homicides and assaults jumping 52% and 64% respectively from 2019 to 2021, according to the Public Policy Institute of California. With heat, drought, and crime all on the rise, it led me to question if they were all somehow related. I hypothesized that the counties experiencing higher temperatures and lower precipitation will have higher violent crime rates than counties less affected by climate change. To prove this, I collected crime data from FBI's Crime Data Explorer from 2005 to 2020 across 16 California counties with the highest concentration of cooling centers. I then took that data and converted the violent crime rate to per 100,000 people, as shown in Figure 2. Next, using data pulled from the National Centers for Environmental Information, I graphed the average summer temperature and annual precipitation in these counties, shown in Figure 3 and 4, respectively. While it was clear these counties have very similar weather trends despite being in different regions of the state, what was even more obvious was the lack of a correlation between my weather and crime data, so much so that I would not conclude there was a positive relationship. While my findings do not support my hypothesis, the effects of climate change will continue to promote extreme weather events in our state. I suggest policies that promote the protection and expansion of the water supply, supporting environmental justice, and incorporating climate equity into future planning efforts to help build up communities most vulnerable to climate change and crime would be most effective. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for that great presentation today, Simon. And so if there's a question from the internship host site. And then if not, over to our academic team. All right, Professor Quila.
Hi, Simon. Thank you for your presentation today. It was helpful. I guess, my question for you is, what effect do you think kind of the pandemic has in terms of the relationship between, the climate and crime as you're looking at it?
I think the pandemic probably, continues to have a lot of people high strung. So I do see that as a potential factor for affecting the crime rate. I'm not entirely certain how it would relate to my weather data, though. I do think that coming out of the pandemic and after seeing, kind of nature returning to normal, that people do kind of have a better understanding and respect for how they can have an effect on the climate. And so I would hope that broader support could be made to implement some policies that would help mitigate the effects of climate change. And I also would hope that even though there is no correlation, if people have better access to things like cooling centers, like clean drinking water, the heat index tool that Luz Rivas got passed this year, I feel like things like that will help to kind of alleviate people's stress from the weather. So I hope that answers your question, and thank you.
Yes, yeah, it did. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Simon, for that great presentation again, Professor Quila for the question. And so our next presenter today will be Natalie Guess, who interned with Capital Weekly.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Natalie Guess, and this is my presentation about coast-to-coast benefits of support spending. Addiction has become an extremely prevalent issue within the United States, especially in regards to the opioid crisis and the rise in dependencies after the COVID-19 epidemic. Overdose deaths within the United States have ballooned to almost 1 million people since 1999, with a staggering 37% increase in overdose deaths from 2020 to 2021. Although federal funding has been, it's getting there, many individual states and cities have been leading in efforts and harm reduction initiatives to help prevent overdose deaths. New York has become the first US city to officially open a harm reduction site, and California has also raised the call to hold more harm reduction initiatives with Senate Bill 57. By comparing 5 different counties within California and New York that hold similar overdose death rates, analyzing their spending habits on mental health and addiction services within the community, addressing the rate of these overdose deaths, hospitalizations, and emergency room visits per county, I hypothesize that increased spending on mental health and addiction services will help all rates of overdose usage decrease. Through my research, I was able to discover that even when counties held similar death rates from overdose, their spending as well as rates of hospitalization and emergency room visits due to opioid use differed greatly. New York counties on average had about 7 times more hospitalizations and about 4 times more emergency room visits due to opioid use. But the price was that California on average spends about 200 times more on its annual budget on mental health and addiction services.
All right, thank you so much, Natalie, for that great presentation. And if there is a question from Open California, I went ahead and unmuted you. You might want to mute on your end too. There we go.
Hi, Natalie, that was great. Thank you very much. I had a question about New York and California comparisons. If I read that right, 7 times as many hospitalizations, 4 times more emergency room visits due to opioid use. Is that compared across the board? Is that compared to California? Maybe you got into this, I just didn't see it.
So how I broke it down was I definitely broke it down as per rates and percentages. So that way the population would not drastically impact sort of how the impact was felt on the community. So when it came down to the rates of hospitalization, emergency room use, and all of that, it was a rate out of 100,000 people. So in that way, and then by using the percentages of the budget, I hope to sort of better compare the two since they do have different population sizes.
Okay, great. Good report. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks so much, Natalie, for the great presentation. And John, thank you so much for that great question. Appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and have Brooke stop our recording.